Note, we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to regular council meeting of September 25th. It is 7 o'clock and I think we're getting a bit of an echo. Anyways, we'll carry on with the agenda. We have our land acknowledgement in the agenda package. I'll call the meeting to order. Yes.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I wonder if we could read that.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. The district of Sechelt is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation. We respect the histories, language, and culture of the people of the Sechelt Nation, whose presence continues to enrich this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we're not in the meeting yet, so.
Land acknowledgement is not just about acknowledging the land, but it's also expressing your thankfulness for being on the land. So I just want to say, for me, I stand in support of Sechelt Nation and acknowledge the privilege of holding District of Sechelt office. I value having the opportunity of meeting face-to-face with the Sechelt leadership and staff. I reject residential school denialism outright. And I will be at the reconciliation walk wearing my orange shirt on Monday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council will call the meeting to order at 7:01 and got the agenda in front of you. Are there any issues, concerns, conflicts? Not a motion. Not aware of anything. Moved and seconded. All in favor of adoption? Carried. All right, Mr. Shea, you're up. Welcome, Mr. Raf Shea, Manager of Sustainable Development for the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and going to talk about for the SCRD Climate Action Plan. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Henderson. We're pleased to be here to share an overview about the recently adopted Community Climate Action Plan at the SCRD. And this will be a brief overview of what was shared with the SCRD board. We'll start with providing a quick overview of some updates to climate risks on the Sunshine Coast, and then an overview of the plan itself and ways that it's being moved forward. When diving into this work, we always find it helpful to frame the discussion by remembering that we have the power to shape the stories that we write, or to write the stories that we live. So we're going to present information here that are indicating that we're moving towards that bottom left corner of poor social condition and poor planetary health. But we do have the power to write a more positive story, and the Community Climate Action Plan lays out a path to making that a reality. So to start off with, one of the building blocks of the CCAP was the climate risk assessment, and we have some updates to the science on some of the specific risks. And we tried to update our understanding as that trickles in. This work is key so that we're prepared and striving to do it in a way that's grounded and not alarmist. Quick update on drought. We know that this is a priority of the SCRD strategic plan and a priority for our community. Right now we have 7 and actually almost 8 of the last 13 summers saw precipitation below the worst case projections for 2050. And that's in addition to the drought sometimes lasting longer into the fall. Some good news on that is there's several projects underway and completed, one of which being the Grantham's well field, which contributed quite a bit of water, I think 15% to the Chapman water system over the summer, just over the month of August specifically. Wildfire is on everybody's minds across the country, and our Fire Smart program just received funding for an additional continued round of implementation. But even with the wildfires that are far away, their smoke is a health risk that's affecting our community. And children in particular are vulnerable to particulate matter 2.5. You can see from the graph here from Metro Vancouver, those occurrences in the green line are happening more and more frequently. And we're finding more and more that, the science is finding more and more that the PM 2.5 is so small, it's actually entering the brains and impacting children's intelligence. So every summer of my 6-year-old's life, I've had to tell her at some point in the summer that it wasn't safe to go outside, which is a new reality. Coastal flooding, we've now have a live Let's Talk page, letstalk.scrd.ca/coastal-flooding. So hopefully we've got a project here underway with partnership with District of Seashelt. And by summer or spring 2025, we'll have some maps to share with the community to look at the probability of recurrence of flood events in the present day and the future. So that'll be some really helpful information as we work on planning and updating our tools to adapt to that. Extreme precipitation, we've seen it in the atmospheric rivers, which now our planning is, it'll be about 3 times more frequent. And then same with heat, we're expecting heat waves to be 4 times more frequent by 2050. And this is already having impact. We also have the extreme heat emergency response plan now at the SCRD, which will hopefully help us build resilience. And now we can dive into the Community Climate Action Plan. The plan itself has 2 dimensions. The first is a description of what our community needs, and this is quite broad and meant for everybody. The second aspect of the CCAP describes SCRD's roles and commitments in moving these actions forward. If some of the actions seem SCRD specific, they were included in there because they're community-oriented services or would be best achieved through collaboration. In developing the plan, we were aware of paying close attention to all the requirements and the supports that are happening or upcoming from the federal, provincial, and the different local sectors. And creating alignment with these will help to ensure the Sunshine Coast is responsive to upcoming requirements and able to seize opportunities that will benefit our community. The plan development started in earnest in 2021 with the initiation of the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities framework. And a lot of the foundational reports were completed in 2022, which I've shared in the past. The action planning took place mostly in 2022 and 2023, and it included stakeholder interviews, workshops with a variety of groups, a Let's Talk page with 2,300 visitors during the active window, and a survey with 390 responses. The first version was presented to the board in 2023, and it was referred to the strategic planning process as that was evolving. And then it was brought back with some slight amendments in 2024 and then adopted. A big part of the development of the plan was the Community Climate Working Group. You can see some of the organizations that were represented here. I just want to extend my deep gratitude to their invaluable advice throughout that process. They participated in a lot of workshops and surveys throughout a period of a few years to help bring this to where it is today. So the plan itself is structured around good governance and enabling actions, adaptation, and mitigation. And the first category of good governance and enabling actions is about addressing the overarching actions that can help support success in all the other areas. There are things like building on the federal and provincial efforts to integrate a climate lens, hosting more dialogues and collaboration. Then we have adaptation of buildings and infrastructure, and this is centered around building a more robust understanding of climate risks, and then developing decision-making frameworks to help us adapt and prioritize to those risks. You'll note here that we've also elevated natural assets as a standalone category because of the many co-benefits that we can get from that, and we're going to be getting some more information as part of our OCP renewal process. On the waterfront, we understand that it's a central focus of the SCRD strategic plan, and the intent here is not to replace the water strategy or anything that's happening in the many local governments or initiatives. It was more to add the climate twist so that we can avoid some blind spots. And then there was another category around building resilience and diversification of water-intensive businesses and agriculture. With regards to ecological stewardship, we divided this into the first category of better integrating the mechanisms into the SCRD services themselves, and then more broadly speaking about how do we support ecological and biodiversity so there's a more resilient baseline. The Seashell Tree Program is a good example of this that provides also many co-benefits around stormwater, habitat, resilience, and heat. So this is like a good example of how it's all connected, even though we're trying to separate them out. Adaptation, also there's a category on connectivity, community health, and support. We all know that social capital and community connectedness is essential for preparedness and resilience. There's also, it's a co-benefit is that it's really helpful to our citizens' well-being overall. There's another category here where we're looking at the institutional mechanisms that that agencies can take to build the services to respond to extreme weather like wildfire or heat events. And finally, climate change impacts people differently. Equity-deserving groups, youth, and elders are often more impacted and less well-equipped to navigate challenges. So it's important that this is made explicit in our work, and there's some actions around that. And then there's a category of mobility, which mentions the provincial target of 30% of trips made by bike, bus, or walking by 2030. And we currently sit around 16%, so quite a bit of ways to go. And then the other area here is electrifying transportation. We got the building mitigation of emissions there. And that's primarily around supporting a marketplace that's capable of delivering the massive quantity of retrofits that we're going to be needing to reduce carbon pollution and increase efficiency and comfort, and then hopefully in some cases also reduce energy bills. And on the better new buildings front, again, it's supporting that market readiness because the new steps of the STEP code and the zero carbon STEP code are coming into force in 2027. So being ready to implement those in our community will be great. And we're looking at also some strategies that we can promote efficiency and renewables. And the final category here is carbon dioxide removal. These are things like regenerative agriculture, sustainable forest management practices, and a bunch of technologies around carbon capture that actually don't even exist yet. We haven't included it here because the SCRD is going to be developing all these technologies. It's here because we just have to be open to the critical need for these areas to sequester carbon at this point. That's where we're at with our emissions profile and where we need to be going. So finally, there's a section here around operationalizing the plan. Accompanying adoption was a series of board directives. And if the plan is that higher level, everything that we need to do, the board directives were how is staff going to be focusing on the next steps, and it functionally orients the work plan. So there's a variety of areas here, and some highlights are setting some greenhouse gas emissions targets that are evidence-based or science-based in line with best practices. And these targets live in official community plans, so there's opportunity for congruence and collaboration along the coast. There's also a list of directives that look at the climate lens and incorporating that into decision-making and building a climate adaptation framework so that we can have support a more holistic and integrated decision-making process for prioritizing adaptation. And then there's other things like the utilizing complete compact community principles and official community plan renewal, and developing frameworks to wrap our head around how we can start to integrate ecosystem diversity and biodiversity into our services. So that's briefly some of the highlights. And finally, one of the directives was to refer this to Seashell Council to see what you want to do with the information, for your information, with an invitation to be here to answer any questions, should you have any.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Council, questions? Councillor Shepherd and then Councillor Bell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Shea. I am curious how Seashell's operations will import parts of the overall regional strategy, climate strategy. So I imagine that when we're updating our official community plan, we're looking to your work to see where it can be put into the plan. I think you mentioned that the region's working with Seashell on mapping of coastlines, but tell me about other ways that you're working with our staff on parts of the plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. there's multiple areas where SCRD staff can collaborate with Seashell staff, and the coastal floodplain mapping is one example of where we can come in and all come together to create an informational baseline upon which we can all work with the same information. There's other areas where we're fostering collaboration so that we can promote some exchange of data and consistency in data collection so that we can then move towards planning processes that are more congruent and consistent across the coast. I think one of the big areas is going to be a climate adaptation framework where we can better understand the vulnerability of our different assets as against the variety of climate risks. And from that asset and risk matrix, we'll be able to dive into a little bit more of what are the different adaptation strategies that are at our disposal as a community. And that's where a multi-jurisdictional ecosystem emerges, because a lot of our risks mitigation approaches will have to be multi-jurisdictional, and a lot of our assets are overlapping. So that's in I think the directive said an initial framework somewhere in Q4 of 2024. So I'm working on that right now, and via your colleagues on the council, we'll be hearing from that. So there's the two avenues of staff and council as well, where we can work on. And then there's other areas where Seashell has jurisdiction and the SCRD does not. Roads are a good example where the SCRD doesn't have a road function. We rely on MOTI. Same with stormwater. There's a big area there where we can look at collaborating. So the list is long, and I try to have a more of a holistic approach with the frameworks rather than diving into the specific asset or the specific risk.
Yes, through the chair. Certainly similar to what Councillor Shepherd's question was. First of all, this is an extremely comprehensive, rigorous plan. I know it takes a lot of work to put these together, and thank you to all of those that worked on that. Is definitely well needed, and we know that there is, it is certainly a key piece of all of our plans for the future. My question would be around, and I know you're very early in the operational stages. So definitely, obviously, this is a regional plan. And given the magnitude of this plan, do you have a sense of how you're going to prioritize what the actions are coming out of this? And I'm not asking you for what those are. I'm just wondering how that will set us up for any budget-related needs, that types of things. So as we look forward.
Please go ahead. Our microphone system seems to have a bit of a delay, so trying to keep off the microphone as much as I can.
The prioritization of the many actions is in part based on the jurisdictional responsibility. So SCRD has looked at where it has control or influence, and those are things that rose to the top. Another factor that came into the consideration is leverage. You know, what's the actual potential impacts that will come from these actions? So jurisdiction, leverage, and then I think where the directives that we have received, the staff has received, is to bring these frameworks that can help promote a more holistic and integrated decision-making, so that the prioritization on the specific adaptation strategies, for example, can then come from that. And that would be a policy decision that we would be supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you, Chair. I was waiting for a couple of council members who aren't necessarily at the regional district to ask quite a knowledgeable and excellent staff member of the regional district to, after they presented, to ask some questions of Rapi. The presentation here tonight was, as always happens at the regional district on the environmental file, and myself and Councillor Toth, I get the information and in some cases pass on the information, as I did with Councillor McLaughlin a few weeks ago on the climate information, but also to encourage Mr. Shay to come and speak to us on the environmental pieces, because it's very much in the area of the regional district, that larger plan. So I'm glad that he comes. I would love to see him here annually at the very least. But I think that as we move forward as a municipality, I think I've mentioned them before, but I'll just remind council what I think we should be talking about and or focusing on through planning and or plan implementation and district infrastructure is water course protection, density, alternative transportation, and our tree cover. And that includes deciduous tree cover. So those are 4 things that I think the municipality can do and that we should be really strenuously focusing on in order to have a sustainable community for the next number of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inkster. Anything on this side of the table? Councillor McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you through the chair, since I was on the spot with Councillor Inkster. I'm wondering, how does this plan really integrate with our own sustainability plans and that of Gibson's? And are there any plans to create some kind of new committee or anything to help us implement and share ideas and share costing and kind of design together and develop together in terms of, natural assets and capital assets, et cetera? Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Ralph, I think we're still online, but the
Yeah,
public, but
thank you,
we just
Chair.
lost the internal screens. Oops, now we're back, we hope. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think there was quite a bit of discussion around governance structures for fostering the implementation of the plan in the future. And in the end, a higher level ad hoc topic specific collaboration was directed out of the process. So that's what we are pursuing on, or that's what staff are pursuing to foster some collaboration opportunities, building on the many that are existing already, with a desire not to replicate what's already happening. And given the breadth of topics, there's often different people that come together around one topic, like drought adaptation versus heat adaptation versus transportation. So there's overlaps, and then that's where some of us can act as some connective tissue between those different groups as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe just from me, the across Canada, this is probably the biggest, most daunting issue we face, in terms of actually how do we implement the resilience projects and the adaptation initiatives and stuff. So what are we going to do you think? What are the first 1 or 2 big things that we should focus on? Because we need to be in first to get some of the funding that's coming from federal government and the provincial government. I know it's not your decision, but if you had a magic wand, what would you see us do first?
Thanks you for the question, Chair. I think one thing that comes to mind is that without leadership on mitigation of our carbon pollution, our adaptive capabilities will be exceeded. So not losing sight of reducing our emissions and creating more sustainable communities on that front is helpful. And the SCRD's got an internal corporate greenhouse gas emissions target that is being operationalized through different processes right now. And then on the adaptation front, I think what's going to be the first major steps that staff will be bringing back is really this adaptation framework, so that we can start looking at the whole thing. If you look at the recently completed, I don't think it's public yet. It will be public soon, the hazard risk vulnerability analysis. We've recently updated that for the Sunshine Coast, and that's a similar, more holistic approach to looking at all potential hazards. And climate change was was integrated as a variable in the analysis of all those different hazards. So similarly, on the adaptation, now we've got these bigger overview understandings of what's affecting our community. Having a way that we can evaluate all this information with all the actual services that we're responsible for will help us prioritize where we're allocating our resources ultimately. I think we have.
Okay. Oh, thank you. It was a bit of an unfair question to throw at you without giving you a heads up. So I think the message discussion, folks? Yes, Councillor Shepherd.
Yeah, I mean, this is relatively straightforward from the report. I went through staff's listing of each recommendation and what timing it would take. And these, I think there are thornier issues that are coming up later in terms of time, like committees that have to be created when we already have so many, but these are pretty straightforward. So I'm in favor of all of them. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I would ask in the absence of anybody else's hand up, it's unusual that something would come to us, the first point, that would come to us to be endorsed and then referred to, in this case, to staff, but in this case to the CAO. Why would we not be getting the staff's, the CAO's input before we do this?
Thank you for the question. The ones that we've committed to, for instance, the CAO and council administration protocols really talks about the treatment of respect. I think with the acting CAO present today, that is something that we feel comfortable committing to, and we are in regular communication with our CAO, and we don't see an issue with this. We have left out all the ones that refer to the mayor and CAO relationship, and that is due to that reason, that he is not present, and we will be putting those on hold for reasons that are in camera, as well as because that was the will of council.
Okay, but my question is, why would we not get that input before it's brought to us?
Those ones are on hold. The ones that speaks directly
I
to the
don't know
mayor.
that's, so we're endorsing appendix, the proposal is endorse appendix G, but nothing that involves any potential changes? Like, if we endorse this and then the CAO wants to make some changes, then it has to come back to us.
Correct. The CAO is happy to endorse the entire report. And this was about a timeline. So the
Right.
one in Appendix G, if you look at it, we are acting on those things already. And that's why this is here in front of you today. The ones that speak directly to the mayor's relationship with the CAO, those are the ones that will be on hold.
Okay,
A lot of it talks about role clarity as well as decorum in meetings and the way that we treat each other.
yes. Okay, is the third paragraph part of the CUF report? Third section about the subsequent performance assessment?
That's correct. Thank you through the chair. It's in, you'll see it in the attachment. I believe it was not an appendix, but it was, I'm looking for it now, like 7.3 or it was within the CUF report recommendations, but it wasn't an appendix. I'd be happy to find it for you and get back to you
Okay.
on that.
Please. Okay, council. It's important. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, through the chair. I'm just wondering if Appendix D, commitments by the mayor,
Do you
if
have a
that is,
page- do you have a
if
page
that is
number?
included in your recommendations,
Do you have a page
page
number?
23, or 159.
So you, and thank you. What's your question?
Is that included in the recommendations? I don't see it listed specifically. Makes reference to Appendix G,
That's right.
but not to D.
I think that's because the comments are that things that are on hold, we're not dealing with as yet. That be correct?
That's correct. And I do have an answer. It was within an appendix. It's Appendix D and then it's 7.3 for the performance review. So that would have been a typographical error that I didn't include the Appendix D, but it is 7.3 in the recommendations in Appendix D talks about the performance. And you're correct about your question regarding Councilor McLaughlin.
Yeah, we're having a little, the audio is a little bit strange. Maybe you can, not sure what, but okay. Is that all right, Councilor McLaughlin?
Yeah, I just question the value of going ahead without that commitment from the mayor, because we're rolling along, but we still haven't got a commitment, et cetera, from the mayor. So, I just question really what's the point?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I believe at this point, without the commitment from the mayor, in the name of good governance, we're hoping to move around the mayor and CAO relationship and carry on with our work plans and our commitment to the public. Thank you.
Looking. Yeah. Please, Councillor Rowe.
Yeah. Just to agree, I mean, I think I understand Councillor McLaughlin's point 100%. However, there are things within this report that do not involve that relationship that we should move forward on actioning. So I'm happy with this at this point and look forward to moving forward. I support these recommendations.
Okay, so council, you're happy with, for example, on page 6, that highlighted that the staff is proposing an orientation guide to be completed by October 2025. And that so you're thinking of running will be done by October 2025 as well, recognizing the election is in October 2025.
6.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, thank you. Please, Councillor Shepherd.
Yeah, I think one of the great values of this report is preparing the next council in a better fashion than what we received. Yeah, I think that's a valuable part of this. Thanks.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Okay. On that same page, I need to again say I don't agree with the statement denied that's been included in the staff report under 3AB. Page 6, item 3A and B, the staff's report says denied. I don't, that is not correct. You may disagree with what I've said, but I have made statements that I think are appropriate. And so I need to declare that. I need to speak? Oh, now, okay, thank you. What I said was that in 3A and B, the comment added is that I have, the word is denied, and that's in respect of issuing a public apology and that the statement be publicized. I disagree with the use of the word denied. I believe I've made the appropriate comments and I stand by them. I did them, I believe, in early June or July, I guess, and privately and then publicly. And I think, so that's why I'm saying I don't agree with the use of the word denied. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. This report has, as many know, and as the release of the larger document indicates, a number of pieces in it. And the pieces that we're approving tonight, I'm certainly comfortable with. There's a number of other pieces, including the preparation of future councils that we can wait on and deal with, the CAO pieces that will come when the CAO returns that I'm perfectly comfortable with dealing with. As I indicated, it's a substantive report. We'll make a number of changes over the next number of months in reflection of the report. But I would just ask you on 3A, because you've spoken to these issues a number of times before, when this report came out and there was a request for an apology, what word would you replace denied with in your suggestion? And not that the document will be changed, but what word would you replace it with? Because each of these recommendations has a word to indicate
Completed.
Staff's.
My word would be complete. My word would be completed
Okay.
or done.
Okay, and you're suggesting in your mind, you
Yep.
say completed or done. Okay,
Mhm.
okay, I'll make note of that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
Yeah.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I'm just wondering on that point, if we could know the date that the CUF report was released versus the day that you say you, whatever, commented on it. I think you were in your car or something and traveling or something, so.
Yes, well, the CUF report, to the best of my recollection, was released on June 26th. And I think my comments in private were July 3rd, and then in public in this room were July 11th.
We were driving from Calgary July 3rd.
I'm saying I made my comments on July 3rd.
Did anybody confirm that date for the CUF report? I'm just wondering. Thank you.
The council received the report on June 22nd.
Sorry, but we discussed it in our meeting on June 26th.
That's correct. I just
Yes,
was asked when it
that's-
was received.
Okay. So do you want to comment? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
I just want to acknowledge that I do recognize that you made those comments both on your way back from FCM and then later in council chambers. Those were the same comments that council unanimously felt did not meet the requirements of an apology. So I understand that we will forever, going forward for the next 104 weeks, disagree on this. But, and I understand that you believe wholeheartedly that you're right. But the fact of the matter is, council didn't accept that as an apology for reasons that were discussed at that council meeting. So I'm obviously okay with it being noted in the report. I just wanted to give
Okay.
some clarity to that situation.
And I'm treading a fine line because I think some of what we discussed may have been in closed meeting. So let me put it this way. I would welcome council providing me with their views of what they would like, what they think is appropriate, and I will consider that. Yes, Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I'm not sure what form you would like that to take. If in fact, a number of the comments are made in camera in reference to a document that was in camera, I'm assuming now though that when the complete document is in public, that those remarks could be considered by you to be made in public.
Yeah, well, that's why I put it the way I have, but rather than debating whether something was or wasn't in a closed meeting, at this point, I don't remember, but I'm saying here and now, if council would like to give me some wording that they feel is a appropriate apology in contrast to what I've already given, I'm certainly prepared to consider that.
And what I was suggesting though, if you, the information and or the words that you had spoken then, even if it was in camera, if it's in reference to a document that's now public, do you remember any of that and would like to repeat those comments that you made then, now that the document is
No,
public?
I'm not going to do that on the fly. I'll
Okay.
be happy to put that well, it's in the public record.
Yeah.
It's in our meeting of July 11th
Yes.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
And as far as, I don't remember the timestamp, but
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody could find that.
So I was just thinking though, Chair, that if, and I understand that that was something that's a few months ago now, and it's, you didn't know that I would ask, as you call it, on the fly. If in fact we could proceed to that moving forward, then council may have some comments that are not on the fly, as you may have suggested this evening as well, in reference to those, in reference to your comments and your encouragement to council to have a proposal to you as to how we move forward.
I'm not sure I followed all of that, but yes, I stand by
Yeah.
what I said. If you wish to offer something to me, I'll certainly consider it.
And as that's in reference to that, on the fly would be, that this would be on the fly right now tonight if we were to do that, but if you're
Yes.
asking for future,
Yes,
then I'm sure council.
I see. Yes. Councillor Bell.
So just to be clear, looking at 3A and B, the word denied, is that what you want to see changed and why you want us to come back and perhaps have different wording as to what we mean by A and B?
Well, I'm suggesting, certainly from my point of view, I believe that they are complete. Just seeing that word complete is used in other points. So look, folks, this is a complex document. There's a lot of components to it, and focusing on this one item is, which I happen to think has been dealt with, but I understand that's not, certainly everybody doesn't agree with it, but I think we've got other ones to focus on as well. Thank you, Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify because we've got 4 recommendations on the floor right now, and I'm not seeing how any of them relate to 3A.
Because it's in the staff report. So I'm remarking that I disagree with the categorization in the staff report. I also would welcome the response to the question I asked about the performance assessment, that if we endorse the generic roles this is back on page 4, item 3, that the new and generic roles be utilized. That we'll be getting into this later in the agenda on the officers and employees bylaw. It's a change, and I don't recall that this item 3 was in the CUF report. So I look forward to receiving that, those details so I can look at them.
If I can speak to that, I said two things at once, so I might have been caught, but it is in Appendix D, it's 7.3.
Appendix E,
D,
D, which is on page what? 23, thank you. So that, on page 23 references the CAO performance appraisal. Page 11, you, Councillor Todd?
Excuse me, is it page 9 that you're looking for? Number 9, CAO administration. We recommend that council pursue a CAO performance review?
No,
Not
no,
that.
I'm referencing on page 4, there's a comment that the generic, more generic responsibilities would be the basis for the performance appraisal. And it's quite unusual. My point is, it's quite unusual to modify something retroactively. So I'm looking for why that is brought forward here when I didn't recall it being in the CUF report. Yes, please.
Appendix D isn't included in this report because that was an oversight as mentioned. So 7.3 is in Appendix D, but Appendix D isn't in the report. And so if you'd like to,
I think we need page numbers, please. The appendix and references.
you
Page
won't,
what?
you won't find the appendix because it's not in this report. If Appendix D that I'm referring to is not in the report.
Appendix A, B, C, D. I'm sorry.
A, B, C, D. So at the what was included was the language from 7.3. It's at the beginning, I believe, of the attachment.
Appendix D is the commitments by the mayor.
Okay, Director Allen has found it on page 23.
And could you highlight which point you're then?
I will get back to you on that.
Okay. So council, in the absence of that, I would suggest that that particular part be deferred from the resolution. On the basis that yes,
So we have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
And are you suggesting an amendment to that motion?
yes.
Sorry, the reason for?
Because I don't remember that that is part of the CUF report. And if it is, I'd like to understand the context because it's clearly not part of the package in front of us.
Sorry, through the chair, just to clarify, question of staff, are all these schedules not taken from the CUP report?
Oh, yes,
All right, so.
but it's not, I don't remember, we don't have reference to what I'm going to call item 3 of this report.
So it's just that you don't remember that it's part of the.
No, I don't think it's part of the CUF report. Thank you.
Page 144 of the full CUF report, item number 9C. We recommend that the generic roles, report 7.3 of the CAO be endorsed by council and the CAO, and that these be utilized during any subsequent performance assessment of the CAO by council. Page 144 of the full report.
Which we don't have in our document. Okay, but it's there. Thank you, Councillor Toth. Okay. I will accept that. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I'm still concerned that if the mayor believes he's made some sort of equivalent to an apology, why he would not support us adopting Appendix D, which is commitments by the mayor.
First of all, because it's not part of the recommendation from staff. And when the time comes, when it comes forward, I'll have comments about it. If it was brought forward, I would have addressed it.
Right, I'm just saying logically it does, they two go together. an
No,
apology
well,
And then adopting this.
Okay.
So you haven't indicated that you will support this Appendix
I'm
D in any
dealing,
way.
no, Councillor McLaughlin, I'm dealing with the documents that are presented to us and responding to them.
Right. We could add it if we wanted to. If you wanted to, you could add it.
If I had spent the time reviewing it, maybe I would, but I have not. Okay. Council? I have a feeling I know where council wants to go. Could you just maybe to our acting CAO, could you explain, there's a few that reference on hold question mark. I look at page 9, item 9D and 9E, just the question mark. There's been on hold question mark. What's
Thank you
the
through the
difference?
chair. The question mark was to indicate a council discussion, so it was staff's recommendation that it be on hold, but I wanted to flag it for council discussion in case you would not like it to be on hold.
Sorry, maybe my ears are getting bad, but I'm not understand, maybe sit back a bit, yeah. Either close or not close, so I'm not sure which.
I've done both, so I'll keep trying. The question mark was to indicate that it might require council discussion, so I made judgments on all of them, and I thought that the question marks might flag a discussion by council.
Okay, so you're looking for us to discuss each of these tonight?
You absolutely don't have to. It sounds like the will of council is to endorse them as is, and I'm happy to keep them on hold. It would certainly alleviate our busy work plans.
Okay,
If I can further add, it's on page 12 is the one we were talking about earlier for 7.3.
on page 12, what, please?
Page 12 talks about the performance review that you were asking about previously.
Except Councillor Toss thing, I don't see the performance. Anyways, it's in the report, which is what I was asking, so thank you. Okay, Council? Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I just have a question about the first recommendation. When it says that council dash administration protocols, Appendix G, be endorsed in principle. When it refers to council there, does that include the council, which includes the mayor, or is it council only and not the mayor?
It includes all of us. Councillor McLaughlin?
Right.
I'm
like
answering.
administration down.
No,
Yeah.
I'm answering it. Thank you. Council, what else would you like to raise? Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you. So if I understand this right, if we endorse these recommendations. Basically, the question mark after the whole disappears, right? So I understand where you're going with that. As far as the ones that have a question mark, I think they involve the CAO. And I'm in support of those being on hold until such time he's here. So just clarifying. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's my understanding. Okay. All right, council, how would you like, anything else? Anything else? Councilor McLaughlin.
Through the chair. I'm just noting that the idea of an orientation guide, having that as a priority right now. The local government training that we get has quite an extensive guide. So I don't think it's true that one doesn't exist, but it has to be applied. So writing another guide, if it's not applied, seems like, what's the point again? So we do, there is one that we all got. We had sessions, et cetera. Now, I don't know why George Cuff maybe wasn't that familiar with that, because he was only here for a short period of time. But I'm just wondering if, if council agrees that you want to write another guide.
I would welcome somebody else's comments, but I think his point was that we can do better rather than it wasn't done or something needs to be started fresh. Councillor Rowe?
Council McLaughlin's correct. Unfortunately, that happens in February. We're elected in October. And I think the idea was actually to have some fulsome documentation. So a year from now, we can start saying to people, hey, only 10 more months before those nomination papers come out, and here's some information that you might find interesting. I know years ago, the Women's Campaign School that I went to by mistake had all that sort of information, and they had probably gotten it from LGLA or something, but I see your point. There's no need for staff to reinvent the wheel, but I think we need to be able to provide some of that earlier in the term and then between terms for that recruitment process.
A comment from
Councillor Bell, thank you.
comment from, through the chair, comment through, from a newbie. I think I was probably one of the people that wasn't completely happy with the orientation. However, part of that could be that I feel that there's a tremendous amount to learn and it was a bit overwhelming. But I think it might be good to get some feedback on what it was missing, and perhaps what an orientation, a solid orientation could look like. So I really don't have anything to compare it to, but I do feel that there are certain areas that needed some improvement, and happy to give that feedback. As I go through my, my role and my learning here, I'm starting to know some of those areas that I feel I wish I would have known more about in the orientation. So it's a timing thing, really. So happy to give that feedback. Thank you.
Okay, let's, anything else, council? You ready for the question? Ready for the question? All in favor? Carried. All right, council, we are 20 minutes behind schedule, so my schedule at least. We'll move to item 5.2. And this is the airport lease modification agreement on page 65. Councillor Toth is going to move the motion.
That's absolutely correct. It seems fairly straightforward to me, moving it as presented.
Seconded. Discussion. Yes.
Sorry, through the chair, I'll just make one quick point. I would love to see legal fees attached to any kind of assignment agreement. I think they're warranted. Just I'll leave that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. We then go to page 65 in the Housing Needs Report. And this is for us for its endorsement. Did see it last week, 2 weeks ago. Anything, council? Any, I guess, again, to,
I was just going to make a recommendation to,
okay,
to endorse this report. Excellent report.
and then seconded. Anything, there've been no amendments since what we saw. Thank you. Okay. No, nothing? Oh. Helps. Okay, all in favor? No, nope, not quite. Pretty close, though. Okay, so then we go to page 117. So who, in the absence of our deputy corporate officer, who's handling this? Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
I'll move the recommendation to start the discussion.
Okay, seconded. So that's to give first, second, and third readings. Okay, Ms. Folson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is simply a much-needed update for our, oh, I'm extra loud today now too. Hopefully that sounds okay for our audience. This bylaw simply brings our municipal officer appointments into alignment with our current organizational structure. So the previous bylaw that we are proposing to be repealed is outdated, and the new one, excuse me, simply reflects the current municipal officers that have been appointed.
Thank you. Okay. Questions, council? Please, Councillor Shepherd.
Well, we are, through the chair, we are moving from, the old bylaw was very specific in terms of roles, and we're moving to something generic. It's just a job or an employment description as set out by the CAO. So I guess we're sort of leaving it to see what that will be, but I'm a little bit uneasy about that, but that's the recommendation from staff. Thanks.
Well, perhaps that's a question. What is best practice and what are other municipalities doing?
There's quite a range of different levels of detail in other municipal officer bylaws. We chose to go with a simplified bylaw because the requirement in the community charter is simply that the municipal officers must be appointed by a bylaw. It doesn't include any requirement to have detailed responsibility listings, tasks, or job descriptions, all of which can change depending on different work plans and different councils, different strategic priorities. This bylaw gives us flexibility to make those changes to meet council's objectives while not having to go through the process of 3 readings and adoption and repealing a prior bylaw each time. And it places the, it states that it's at the discretion of the CAO, which is at the discretion, council's direction.
It is in respect of the CAO, but the CAO would have the responsibility of providing or directing what happens for the other officers.
Well, the responsibility to act out council's
Yes,
strategic objectives.
right.
Through the direction to staff that report to that person.
Okay, picking up on Councillor Shepherd, that's perhaps where my question was, that it was for reasons, good reasons at the time, very prescriptive last time. And I'm curious because this is not something where it's a difference between one community and another. And I guess I'm curious if there isn't a template that's been used or that could be used across the province. You know, this is me very, seems like a lot of, well, perhaps why does it come now? And, oh, and why does it not include the other officer of the district? Sorry, I don't mean to make that a trick question, because there is another officer, which is the chief executive officer of the district. So I'm curious, perhaps, is there a reason that's not in this bylaw?
Yes, it's simply, we're meeting the objectives of, I believe it's section 146 of the community charter that states that municipal officers must be identified through a bylaw. So those are, it's a reference to staff, and there's a separate section of the community charter that addresses the chief executive officer or the mayor.
Right, but this is called the Officers and Employees Bylaw. So I can tell council this has been something that has been a topic of discussion among some of the mayors that have been meeting informally over the last several months, to get some clarity on what are the duties and responsibilities. And I guess that's why I'm not eager to see us give 3 readings tonight to signify that everything is fine, because I'd like to really understand that, speaking for myself, but also speaking because I'd like to understand what my duties are under that provision. And I think that if we're going to have something called the Officers and Employees Bylaw, we should be referencing all the officers. Please.
Yeah, just a question then, and I guess we'll proceed as council proceeds. Maybe it'll be first and second, maybe it'll be first, second, and third. We'll get to that, I guess, as the chair sees fit. The officer positions, just a question on page 131 with the new proposal here in section 2. Does that mean that the officers presented there, then the A to F are part of the management team and/or SMT at the District of Sechelt? As presented there, i.e. then sharing of those regular duties amongst a larger group?
Okay, so the question for the public, SMT is Senior Management Team. It's a term that's used to encompass a group of people. Is SMT these people, or are there other people in SMT? Yeah.
Just the directors.
And the corporate officer.
The corporate officer is not a part of the senior management team.
Okay, thank you. So SMT includes the A, B, C, D, E, but not F. That was your question, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would include that, but that's just my opinion. I would include the corporate officer as part that I've mentioned a number of times. Anyway, we can proceed.
That's up to the CAO. Okay, asked and informed. So council, that's the point I'm making, is that there are some unique things, responsibilities as mayor and chief executive. And I think that I would welcome the clarity of how that fits into the overall structure of an officers and employees bylaw. And for that reason, I would propose in the moment for discussion that we give first reading and encourage staff to come back with answers to that. So before I go to the procedure of that, I'll conceive. Councilor McLaughlin.
Thank you through the chair. I haven't gone through the existing policy on these positions, but I was just wondering if there's any professional credentials or education requirements normally in any job descriptions. I mean, often that is the case, so I don't see any here. Wondered if you could comment on that.
Well, okay, but I think this is before us in terms of the duties and responsibilities of the people holding the position. So what the skills are is quite a different discussion. Yeah.
Wondering what our current policy has or other policies at other places, if they have any reference to those credentials. Thank you.
Okay, so would the credentials be itemized in this bylaw? What you're asking? Is that?
Sorry, perhaps through the chair, they could be included, but I just want to know if they have been included in other policies that you've
Okay.
looked at. Thank you.
Right. So that goes to what do other policies, other bylaws look like from other communities? So, anything you can add to Ms.
Certainly,
Roberts?
through the chair, the ones that I have looked at do not have the job descriptions in them. And so this is why we're looking to amend it. And our job descriptions live outside of the bylaw. So we have job descriptions that include qualifications in for all of our
Right.
roles, but they live in.
But the question was I think the professional designations and so on would not, I think you're saying,
Would
would
not
not
live in the bylaw.
normally be in this bylaw.
That's correct.
But obviously the more detailed description of the duties is in our current bylaw, so.
That's why we're looking to remove it. We're looking to remove it for that reason.
Right. Okay. So council, I will test the room, I suppose, by offering an amendment to give first reading to this bylaw for the reasons that I've mentioned. For a second. Thank you. Okay. I don't have to repeat what I've said. I just think it's about a chance perhaps as well to answer more clearly Councilor McLaughlin's question. And I'd like to see if there are perhaps initiatives from UBCM or the Corporate Officer Association to having a standardized thing for this. These are the sort of procedural projects that, I hate reinventing the wheel 100 and whatever it is, 88 times. So if we can do it, and standardize it, that seems to me far more effective. So speaking in favor of the amendment. Anything else? We'll call the question on the amendment then to give the consequence of which is we would then only be giving first reading in the next motion. All in favor? 3 in favor, opposed? Motion is defeated. Okay, council, motion in front of us is to give first, second, and third readings to bylaw. And call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Opposed, the motion carries. And then we go to the bylaw. So, courts, this is before us for 3 readings, and I would, bylaw number 623-2024. I would observe that there's a typo on page 132. Item D. Should be section 149. Page 132, subparagraph D, the section number is 149. Yes, Councillor Top.
I will move first reading of the bylaw with the amendment as identified.
Okay, we can do. Yeah, we could do all 3 at once if you wish. So you want to repeat your motion?
Yeah, I will move first reading of District of Sechelt Officers and Employees Bylaw 623 2024 with the amendment changing section 4D from 147 to 149.
Okay, thank you. Seconded. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Yeah. So, what do you want? Are you stopping there or not? I don't assume so. Counselor Rowe?
I'll move second.
Okay, seconded. All in favor, second. Carried. And move third. Somebody? Saw a seconder, all in favor. Carried. Okay. So then we go to item 6.2, which is the zoning amendment for the C4 zone. And Mr. Hall, I guess, is going to present. Is that right, Mr. Douglas? Yes. Please, so starting on page 130 and 33, council. Okay, anything, has everybody had a chance to read it? So Mr. Hall, anything to add or?
No, I think the report kind of lays out, obviously the recommendation and the alternate option. So I think based on the rezoning application to make the proposed change to the bylaw, we've kind of laid out the two options. The one that we support that would be consistent with the OCP and therefore could move forward without an OCP amendment, and then the alternate option would require an OCP amendment and be a more substantial change to the bylaw. But I'm happy to respond to any questions from council.
Okay, Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm generally supportive of the amendment here. Even if it's only a couple of secondary suites, we desperately need whatever we can get. I did have one question though, on page 134. The second to last bullet says that the property must have an active principal commercial use in the building with a valid District of Sechelt business license. And so I guess my question is, if the commercial business goes under and closes up shop, does that mean that the residential tenant has to move out as well? I support every other part of the bylaw. I just question that and have
Yep,
a motion to
but-
remove it if necessary.
Right, I could pick up. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, that is certainly a potential issue. Certainly the goal, I mean, the C4 zone is a commercial zone. It's a mixed use zone. So what we've tried to accomplish with the proposed amendment is to allow the secondary suite as a use, but still recognizing it is an accessory use. And, you know, given it's a commercial zone, that means accessory to a principal commercial use. So in this sense, it's trying to offer an ability for people to create some residential uses without turning these buildings into residential buildings, because it's meant to be a commercial zone. You know, while residential use is allowed, it's meant to be mixed commercial and residential, not residential only.
Okay, so are you, just to anchor this, is how would it work as Councillor Toth has raised, if somebody, the commercial tenant or that matter, the commercial owner shut down, what would we do to the tenant? Or what would that do to the tenant?
Yeah, ultimately, if the commercial use is discontinued, then the secondary suite use as an accessory use could not continue either. So they would have to, the tenant would have to leave and they'd have to shut down the secondary suite.
Okay, is that a follow-up or, yes, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just comment for council is that, like, I don't support that at all. I think bringing in a tenant to an empty space where the whole building's empty, that's one thing. But in terms of terminating somebody's residential tenancy just because the business in the front of the building went under, I can't support that myself. I do have a amendment here.
I wouldn't,
into
Wonder if
one.
that would even be legal under the residential
Tenancy
tenancy.
branch, what section that would be? Yeah.
Counselor Inkster?
Yeah, I think that Director Allen has maybe some helpful advice to come. But what I would suggest is that that we would maybe put some wording in there, and maybe Councillor Top has similar to this, that we would say a restrictive expectation that there be a commercial enterprise on top, not a stringent rule that there be. And those were just my thoughts.
Oh, all right.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would suggest perhaps somewhere meeting in the middle to signal the point that these are in fact commercial buildings. To qualify for a suite, must be a business in the building already. We can't, of course, guarantee that business will remain viable, but the point is there's a business there. You have a building that has potential for a downtown suite. We have to have that commercial use first because the suite is an accessory use. In order to qualify for the suite, you have to show there's a principal use there. If that principal use goes under or the lease expires, the owner is looking for somebody else, we can't ask the tenant to move, but we can receive proof that there's a principal use before we permit the accessory use. So it's a little bit of a halfway.
If I can respond to that, we're talking about zoning, not talking about actual occupancy. So if it's zone commercial but empty,
But zoning, and in particular zoning bylaw 580 has two columns, principal uses, accessory uses. For residential property, you can't have a garage without a house,
right,
Right,
but
so
you
in this
don't
case,
necessarily have to occupy the house.
right? We have
You
to have
leave
a
a car in the
principal.
garage.
Correct, but you need the principal use to qualify for the garage.
Un-
So
yeah.
the parallel here is you need the commercial use, which is the principal use of the business before you can qualify for the suite.
Understood, in which case I think I would be satisfied to remove the word active. It must be, we're saying the zoning must be commercial with a residential accessory. But whether or not it's occupied is, I think that's beyond the whatever you call it, the provisions of a zoning bylaw. We zone lots of things and they may or may not have people in them. So I'll turn it to Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Thank you. Through the chair. I just want to speculate that it's possible that the actual commercial user could actually live in the suite. I mean, that can be the case as well. So in that case, if they leave, then the suite would be empty anyway. We don't really know what the situation will be, but I think that's a definite possibility as well for people. I'm not too sure how many of these properties that are proposed actually have existing suites. I'm not that keen on changing the zoning to permit suites, illegal suites to just continue on if they're not upgraded. So I just wonder if that's a question for these particular ones. You probably are quite familiar with the situation on them because there's only a limited number. Thank you.
I think we're talking about 7.
Yeah, the zoning change would affect 7 properties based on the transition commercial designation. And anyone using a suite, obviously, we're getting into whether or not it has a building permit. If they're using a suite where we have a building permit record, or if they're trying to build a new suite, building permit regulations applies.
Do you, Councillor Toth?
Thank you. I'm actually I've got the zoning bylaw 580 open right now, and I'm trying to reconcile the difference in language between caretaker dwelling unit, which we allow in the industrial zones. And so again, I see that as, that's shown as an auxiliary use. And so I wonder too, like if the industrial unit is empty, speaking more broadly, if the industrial unit is empty, does that prohibit the caretaker unit from actually being occupied? Is this actually a wider problem within our zoning bylaw? Thanks.
Does the bylaw say active industrial use? Which goes back to I think the intention is what matters, not the actual, is it occupied or? Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I think for the C4 zone in particular, I guess what we're trying to get at through these regulations is preventing the conversion of these buildings from commercial or mixed use to residential only. It's trying to reinforce that this is a commercial zone, so any residential uses, whether it's apartment that's currently in the bylaw or a secondary suite as this new use is an accessory use. But the principal uses are commercial, but certainly if council wants to make some amendments to the regulation in terms of removing the word active or similar things, I think the intent is really that, again, these buildings aren't converted to residential only use. That we're simply allowing some additional dwelling units in a form that isn't currently allowed, while still in maintaining that these are commercially zoned properties.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, through the chair. Well, I'm supportive of this approach because I think, you know, the houses have quite a bit of utility left in them. For them to be left partially used or not occupied because it doesn't meet the expectations of the owner would be a shame because it's very precious, you know, residential, potentially residential spots, as you say. And it's great location. And to wait for redevelopment and just leave these as they are, I think would just possibly leave it to become a more, almost a derelict situation possibly. So I think this is helpful in terms of sustainability and getting more use out of our buildings and providing accommodation right downtown. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just a little confusion here. Where are we at? I mean, I think what council's suggesting is that we want the two uses to continue, and that if the commercial use ceases, although I think in this case it's a service, not necessarily somebody selling goods, so it probably has a continuous service need in the community, that it would continue. But I think we're proceeding, but we're asking staff just to move this forward to not put words in there, and or, as I suggested, expectation may be a word to be used so that there is no effect on the needed housing.
Right. So I think we're debating, if you council turns to page 139 in the actual bylaw, item 3F, whether Councillor Toth, you posited you might want to pull it, and I suggested we could remove active, and somewhere in there is, I think, where we're headed. Where do you? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, when I look at B, just above it, it does talk about secondary suite only permitted as an accessory use. So I think if we remove active, the entirety of F ends up being covered off by B. So my proposal originally was going to be to strike section 3F and relabel 3G.
Right, thank you. Okay, before we get to the procedural things, can we, because in 3B, I want to be clear, the second part of 3B refers to only existing buildings. I think if my English grammar 11, it sounds like it's only existing buildings that have been constructed as of January 1st. So I guess I'm wondering, why is that really that necessary, that whole clause? Please.
The intent of that clause is really to prevent new buildings being constructed with the express purpose of putting in suites when we're, in terms of redevelopment within the C4 zone, we're really wanting to see multi-story mixed-use buildings. So we don't want somebody to kind of come in and build something that kind of looks like a single-story, single-family home in a commercial zone. So that's kind of what we're trying to get at here. Is this is an allowance for, we have a number of properties that kind of have this historical housing type, but this housing type has been zoned commercially for many decades, and we're trying to recognize or offer an ability for an additional residential use without compromising the ultimate future redevelopment potential of the zoning.
Okay, so then presumably we could it goes to the same thing perhaps about active and occupied. Are we not just talking about this whole thing applies only to buildings that exist today?
Basically.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I'm just wondering process-wise if Councillor Toth moved the striking of F, and I would second that.
Yeah.
To move that forward, and I understand what staff's doing here. There's this particular application and or staff report and or decision by council is reflective of a number of historical properties, including the one specific one that has made this application. So I understand what they're saying. They don't want it to then become a trend.
No,
Yeah.
I agree, but
Yeah.
let's get it right. So
Yeah.
for Councillor Toth, what were you said strike item F, and I would seek your support in saying in B, remove and occupied.
Thank you. I guess my question with the and occupied, I think the words that came to my head when I was looking at it was prior to. Because if we don't have history of occupancy of a suite in some manner that is supported, does that allow a property owner to build a suite in the basement of a building that existed prior to that date? Right? So I think the occupancy speaks to the, continued use, so to speak.
Wouldn't it, if there's I take that point, but if it's an existing suite that's vacant on January 1st, this whole thing doesn't enable us to have a tenant come in. Because it wasn't occupied on January 1st. See, that, again, we're getting into active and occupied and the use of the property rather than the zoning. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I think I can clarify here. I mean, 3B, the main piece on the first half is, clarifying secondary suite as an accessory use. The second half isn't to address existing suites. It just, or to say nobody can build new suites. It's really just that nobody can build a new building for the purposes of putting in suites.
Right.
It's saying we are allowing suite as a new use in existing buildings, whether they have an existing suite that's not permitted or they want to build a new suite that would allow us to issue a building permit. But really to get at that we don't want somebody to redevelop their property and say, oh, I'm going to put in some new suites rather than actually comply with the intent of the C4 zone overall.
Right. So, okay, do you want to respond to that? Or-
Thank you. Yeah, if I look at this, I see better wording could be existing buildings that have been constructed prior to January 1st, 2024.
Yes. Councillor Shepherd?
Through the chair, I was only going to suggest deferring the whole matter forward till the next,
Well, I think we're
Council,
close.
all right.
Unless there's other items, is where we're at on this page 139, I think, is the wording that Councillor Toth has proposed for 3B and deleting 3F.
Yeah, if we can make this work tonight, I'm in support of that. I think that this has been in front of us a number of months and the applicants are waiting, I think, hoping for a decision. So I'm okay if we can make this, I think it's good if we can make this work tonight. I think it just needs a couple of changes with
So the
staff
wording
support.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, help me here, Councillor Toth, what your motion then would be, and I know we're going to come back and recommend the bylaw, but in the bylaw 3B has been constructed prior to January 1st, 2024.
Correct?
And 3F is to delete 3F completely, and therefore G becomes the new 3F.
Correct.
And that is your motion.
I will move that.
And I'm happy to second, or others are there. Okay, so recognizing that that's actually a motion to recommend the bylaw as amended, back on page 133.
I believe procedurally we can amend the bylaw and then pass recommendation one, that zoning bylaw be read for a second and third time as amended.
Please help.
Yeah, I think my motion is in order.
Okay. All right, so this is first reading of the bylaw as amended. No?
The motion on the floor, your worship, is simply to amend the bylaw.
Right.
And once that's voted on, then
All
the
right.
next motion could be to read the bylaw as amended.
Right. Okay. Everybody clear? All in favor? That's of the amendment. So now, we want to do the amended bylaw first reading, or do we want to accept the staff report as amended?
The recommendation here reads that zoning amendment bylaw 580-16, 2024 be read a first, second, and third time. So I'm happy to, yeah, move that as amended.
Okay, seconded. Great, thank you. All in favor of that? Okay, you're on a roll.
I guess that means that I will offer up first, second, and third reading of District of Sechelt zoning amendment bylaw number 580-16, 2024.
Seconded. Concerns, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. That was for all three readings. All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Hall. All right, council. With that. Okay, so we can go to the meeting of minutes of September 4th, 7 o'clock. And they're before us for adoption. Any errors, omissions, corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Second. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And then Committee of the Whole meeting of September 11th. Same questions. Okay, Sir Shepherd, you were chair, so thank you. Second. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And the meeting of September 11th. Okay. Motion. Seconded, all in favor? Carried. And now you want, this is actually in respect of, yes. Behind. Great, that's good. As long as I didn't miss anything. Council, thank you. We go then to item 9. And this is the SCRD reports. In our new seating, I'm surrounded by SCRD representatives.
On purpose?
Okay, you're going first then, microphone.
No, yeah, thanks. We have the number of, somebody's trying to tell me something. Yeah. The regional district worked on a strat plan this week. There's a number of meetings tomorrow with some important items on the agenda. The UBCM had your regional district representatives at a number of ministerial meetings, mainly on regional district issues such as docks, which we don't necessarily have as much concern with, and transportation. And that's all I'll speak to on the regional district at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. And the other half of the team?
Thank you. The only other thing I think I want to add to it is that the SCRD did receive a grant of just under $120,000 to look at evacuation route planning. And that's for the Sunshine Coast as a whole. The last round of grants was for 3 very specific areas on the coast, but this one's for route planning for the entire region. There was also a contract award to explore and design vertical expansion of the Sechelt landfill. It's not sort of the be-all, end-all solution, but at this point, it could buy enough time to locate a new landfill somewhere on the Sunshine Coast without having to ship our garbage off coast. Powell River ships their garbage right now, and it is extremely expensive for them to do so. So ideally, we don't have to do that.
Okay, wow. Thank you. We'll go to council reports and, why don't we start on do ping pong? Councilor Rowe, Councilor Bell, Councilor McLaughlin.
Okay. Okay, so it's been a week or two, that's for sure. We had a meeting today of the Safety Committee, doing a lot of planning around October 3rd, which is our next public meeting, which we are asking people to register for. So please head on over to our Facebook page and scan the QR code to register. We're trying to get an idea of how many people will come so that we can make some contingency plans if we have to turn some people away. So that's been keeping us busy. I do want to address our September 4th council meeting because I've had many people, some I know, some I don't know, who have reached out to me via email and text with regards to what, you know, the reality TV shows like to call the hot mic moment, where some comments were made by the mayor to me while his mic was still on. So I appreciate your support. I certainly recognize the mayor's frustration, but I agree it's not appropriate. It's not how I talk to any council or staff. My expectation is that will not happen again. We attended UBCM, which is always great. I spent the first day at province-wide community to community forum with 144 other municipalities and First Nations, including colleagues from the SCRD, the town of Gibsons, and the Sechelt Nation. We'd had a day of workshops and speakers and questions, answers, and lots of collaboration. And it got me thinking around where the district of Sechelt stands around UNDRIP. So I had our corporate officer go back and have a look of when we endorsed UNDRIP, assuming that we had. Much to my embarrassment, considering this is year 6 for me, the district of Sechelt has never endorsed UNDRIP. So just to my council colleagues, I'm not going to move a recommendation right this second, but I will be putting it forward as a notice of motion to give everybody enough time to consider the conversation that we'll have around that. And that will include that we endorse, my motion will be that we endorse UNDRIP and that we ask staff to review the FCM document, which is a guide for municipalities, and bring back a report as to where council stands with regards to how we currently align with its principles in areas that we don't. So I'm not moving, again, that is a motion right now. I think that's requires time to read and learn, so I will make that a notice of motion going forward. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councilor Rowe. Councilor Bell?
Yes, I also went to UBCM, which stands for Union of BC Municipalities. I know acronyms sometimes need to be explained because there's so many acronyms in governance. And this is actually, it serves as the voice for local government. This is what this conference is about. Councilor Rowe, I also attended the day forum. And the other thing that I noticed that was really seemed to quite a regular message, I guess, quite a strong message was coming out from many of the municipalities to the province around downloading. And it was really around that we significantly, seriously need more resources for mental health and addiction services. and that municipalities were talking about and giving some very quantitative data around the number of first responders that in each one of the communities are responding to the overdose emergencies and so on. So that message came up clearer than I've ever heard it. So hopefully we will see some change in that as going forward. The other thing is I attended the Kairos blanket exercise today, which is put on by the CIAT Reconciliation Movement Group. It was wonderful. It's my second time. It's in advance of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. And what was wonderful, it was all District of Sechelt staff. And I understand that was number 4 or 3? 3. And it was, there was staff from all across the District of Sechelt and very tremendous engagement. I think they're starting to call me Donna Box of Kleenex because I never seem to get through this. But it was an emotional day, some tremendous learning. And I think the message that comes out of that for me is that, especially from the young people, that we need to start the education young in schools. And because many of them spoke about how they didn't know a lot of the things that had happened in the history of Turtle Island, which was now Canada. The last thing is I just wanted to give a shout out to the Vancouver Coastal Health and the Sunshine Coast Hospice Society, Coast Hospice. They've announced the first dedicated hospice on the Sunshine Coast, which will have 8 beds. And so this is family meeting spaces in a sacred space. They still have fundraising to be done, but the new hospice is expected to have occupancy in 2026. And currently these rooms are in Silverstone Care Center, but certainly a much needed service in our community, and hospice does tremendous work. So I encourage the community to look out for any of the fundraising that's needed, and if we can certainly help this along, it'll be tremendous. And I just want to say again, my congratulations to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Donna, enthusiasm. Well, I am really just going to refer to UBCM. Last week was a lot of activity. I attended a range of meetings, some about invasive species, biodiversity, sustainability, creating a low carbon future, appreciating municipal natural assets, which is a growing asset management category that we're all hopefully going to start calculating here too. Flooding issues, a little discussion about flooding in Richmond, which I found very interesting. We'll get into that because it's quite scary. But really honest conversations about what's going on in different places. And it's really nice to also meet with people from other smaller communities. I worked in planning on Vancouver Island a while ago. So it's quite interesting to meet with some of the planners of those small communities and see what's going on, because we have a lot in common with them and their rural aspects and such. So I really appreciated that. We also had some political speeches with, of course, the current premier, David Eby, and he seemed to have a pretty great reception, I thought. And I think overall the feeling in the room was that there has been done a lot, I guess, by the NDP to try and provide housing. It's been a Herculean task. And I think previous years, municipalities were just, shocked and wondering how they were going to possibly meet these requirements. But this year, I feel like they've accomplished a lot. And the feeling is like we're doing this and moving along, and it's to everybody's credit that that's being done, because it's quite amazing. But also related to that is the concern about infrastructure dollars to support the housing. And let's face it, infrastructure dollars, period, for replacing existing infrastructure. Even here, it's a big concern. So that, and also transit is an issue. And some questionable ideas whether we're really going to get the transit we need to have those further afield municipalities outside of Vancouver. So there were very many provincial cabinet ministerial meetings as well. So basically I felt like I was running around a lot. I didn't know where it was going to be, really from 2 hours here, 1 hour there, but you had to be at these meetings as a top priority. So I missed some of the things I wanted to hear, but it was very, very good session. I was very busy and I was very tired when I got home.
Thank you, Councilor McLaughlin. Sorry, I don't think the camera went to you while you were speaking, but we'll go to Councilor Shepherd and see if the camera follows you.
I can't see any camera.
There, good.
I attended the library board, I'm the liaison, I was at the library board meeting today. They're discussing the upcoming renovations and how it's going to affect various departments within the library over the next couple of months. The library board wanted to stress the importance of intellectual freedom and people's right to read whatever they want. Given what's happened at council last week, and I stress council is not trying to tell anyone what to read or what not to read. That's not our role. The final important issue for the library is space limitations. Like council, or sorry, like staff, we're coming to the end of the sort of functional life of our space upstairs and down here, and how they're just busting at the seams. We talked about their interest in hiring possibly a second sort of summer student, and they literally don't have room for one more person. So that's something that council is going to be looking at again. On the weekend, I attended there was a climate change conference, sort of a mini conference, I guess you describe it, in Gibson's. Fabulous information, great experts. I now understand how little I know about carbon credits, but really interesting seminars, also on sustainable agriculture. There were booths set upside. It was a great event, well organized. Today was the select committee on community safety, sort of framing up everything for the next public meeting on October 3rd. Some great work being done then. And also last week, before UBCM, we had to unfortunately cancel the airport development committee for lack of quorum. But I'd had a great sit down with an enthusiastic pilot, Chris Georgius. He's got some fabulous ideas on a terminal building that I think we should pursue in discussions. So it was a very fruitful conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I'm not going to report a whole lot out on UBCM because others have and, will. However, I did attend a community forest meeting, board meeting, and their board is researching the possibility, the costs, et cetera, requiring an air curtain burner, which would allow them to sort of simplify their wood waste disposal. And they're also looking at possibly generating opportunities for the community to be able to get rid of their invasive species. It's been a long conversation. These air curtain burners were always expected to be in the, high hundreds of thousands to low $1 million range. But they're finding units that are in the low hundreds of thousands of dollars that may suit the needs of our community just fine. So they're looking forward to more research and visiting some of these options. UBCM, networking is always the name of the game. I agree with Councillor McLaughlin with all the minister meetings and staff meetings. You end up actually missing out on a lot of the workshops and plenaries that are offered. Lots of other problems in other communities that look an awful lot like ours. So it's great to talk through it with other elected, like-minded individuals. Lots of conversation and questions about how we adapt to disasters and how we build back better rather than just rebuilding the status quo. It may not feel like it after a few years, but it's still really early days in those conversations of what we build back and how we build back. Jennifer did a fantastic job of getting us organized, so I just wanted to say a public thank you for that. And finally, I think I'll leave with that I met a fellow elected, Jerry Taft, who wrote a book called The Safe Word is Pineapple. And it looks into the mental health of elected officials and was actually inspired from a real life mental health break that he suffered last year at UBCM. Bought the ebook, less than $10. And I'm looking forward to reading something actually from another elected official. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Inkster.
Thank you. So it sounds like Councillor Toth had a good meeting with Councillor Taft. Anyway, so I just want to mention a couple of things that happened over the last number of days before I go to UBCM. The climate fair was last weekend, as Councillor Shepherd mentioned, and I was one of the presenters on water, and it was a good discussion, and we hit on some good points, and we had some good questions from the interested people in the audience, and so it's good to see those climate fairs. I'm sure there'll be some more, but it was good to see the fact that we were able to not only present on water but answer a number of the questions. I know that you were in the audience, off to the left there, so there's some good questions and good presentations. The other thing I wanted to mention before the UBCM discussion was the accessibility committee that I went to in Councillor Toth's stead a couple of days ago, and well organized by our corporate officer, that meeting. And it looks like it was the first meeting because I was asked to go, so assuming it was. And so there's some good things moving forward with that committee, and Bill Conway is the chair, as he was a number of years ago. So that'll be a good committee, and the recommendations will come to this council in the form of minutes like they usually do as part of that process. So those are two good things to do. And that was actually done after a busy week at UBCM. So it has been busy. UBCM, as was mentioned by a number of council members, it was good to be at a number of the sessions. I think Councillor McLaughlin, I wasn't able to go to the one on water, sort of the environmental effects of either too much or not enough water, the drought one. And I'm not sure if she touched on that, but it's really important. We're dealing with all of our issues in humanity now, individualized in terms of the struggles we have with homelessness and the drug issues that were being referenced. But we need to remember that going forward, society's either probably going to be struggling with being underwater or being on fire. So we need to be considerate of the number of those environmental concerns on our planet. It's either going to be too much water in some areas, and that's, by the way, climate change. That's not too much water. That's climate change is moving water around, but also the fact that we're getting too hot and the planet is going to be burning a lot. So we just need to keep all these things in mind as a council as well. As I mentioned, the homelessness issue and the addictions issue, it's we know and we heard from throughout BC that a number of communities are dealing with it. So those that wonder what's going on in Sechelt, it's going on in other communities. This council is very understanding. We're doing what we can. We're with you. We're not dismissive. And then when I say it's in other communities, I'm just pointing out that a number of regional hubs throughout the province. One example is Terrace is dealing with huge costs associated with trying to deal with the homeless and addictions issue, and the huge hundreds of thousands of dollars associated directly to that municipality for dealing with it. So we need to continue to ask the province, who's beginning of an election cycle, so they couldn't commit too much, to continue to help us in those areas. So that's what UBCM was to me, very busy, lots of meetings, resolution sessions, which this council was very clearly supporting of the ones that were important to us, and the networking that occurs to find out what's going throughout the other community. The piece I wanted to mention as I end, though, is it was good to have staff there, a couple of staff members there with us for networking and support. And I want to thank the two staff members that were there. And I specifically want to thank Director Douglas for promising to prioritize my budget projects as we go into budget. So I really appreciated his promising me that my projects would be 1, 2, 3, probably 4 and 5 on our considerations. Thank you.
That's, that's, all right. Thank you, Counselor Inkster. First of all, Harbor Air, over the last few weeks, people have heard the announcement that Harbor Air is reducing their services. They're not shutting down, as I've read in some social media things, but clearly they are really resetting. And I think that's something we as council need to be aware of. It's interesting, we got a post, or we got an email today from a citizen commenting on how iconic are the beavers. And I sent a letter on September 11th to the CEO asking him to reconsider. I would love to be able to sit here and say I had some success. What I was able to do is meet with him and the deputy mayor of North Cowichan, because Maple Bay is also, they have been shut down. I don't know if it's good news, but what he shared with us is that they will be flying what are called single otters. These are 14-seat aircraft, and they will fly up from Vancouver first thing in the morning. They'll continue from here over to Nanaimo. If you're going to Vancouver, you'll be able to stay on the airplane along with your luggage and fly down to Vancouver. That's nice, but it's not the first flight out in the morning to get to Vancouver. It'll be later in the morning, as I understand it. I think it's on us to make a real pitch to get them to come back with more vim and vigor, or more commitment. And as well, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everybody that we have another operator who does fly certainly to Nanaimo, and perhaps if there's a demand, they could be convinced to fly to other bases. So we've done our bit, but I think it's up to, and I'm looking to council and to the public to make sure that we find ways to, this is a business, and I guess it's fair to say they felt the numbers have not been there in terms of ridership, but there's another side. I do know that the hospital relies on getting medicine up on the float planes quite regularly. Perhaps it's an opportunity for wheeled aircraft into the airport, but these things aren't going to happen overnight unless somebody wants to buy a beaver and get their pilot's license. The two other things, one, as Councillor Inkster mentioned, there was the Gibson's Public Market at a climate fair. He spoke about water, and I joined Mayor White and MP Weiler speaking about transportation for the future. And there is another climate fair soon, called this Saturday, right opposite here, out in the elementary school playing field. It's part of the Seashell EV Festival, with a number of presentations, 5 or 6 presentations through the day. So we're expanding the EV Festival to bring in more climate issues and opportunities. I spoke earlier in the month to an organization, or to an event called Everything Electric. They had 30,000 people attend, and I spoke on 2 different topics about mobility and energy, and how to attract young people to work in those sectors, and also how to convince people to adopt more sustainable solutions. It was fun and a little daunting when I realized one of the presenters has something like 7 million YouTube followers. The other one is only 2 million. Last but not least, you've heard about UBCM, and you picked up on it thanks to Jennifer and to all the staff that get involved. This is a horribly complex handling for us and all of the municipalities. I did double duty during the week because we had the Green Municipal Fund Council, so I was up at 6 a.m. on a couple of mornings to join their Toronto or Ottawa-based meetings on Zoom. And with that, I'll leave it there. All right, so we then go to item 10.1, and council, that's all know about this, but I guess it's before us for, as correspondence. And I look to you for your, how you'd like to proceed about 10.1. Anybody? Councillor Shepherd.
Well, I mean, I'll move that we accept the letter from the nation. There are two letters. You know, it's it's heartening to hear their letter to council for, in terms of standing up for a rejection of, or just for council for listening to their comments and on the sort of generational problems which flow from the residential schools. So I'm glad we took that move. And the other letter, unfortunately, in regard to the mayor, I just think that council has to sort of sit back and try and absorb what the effects of that are. Obviously, the relationship moving forward has to move between the Shishel Nation and council has to move through council rather than the mayor. They've made that pretty clear. But there are implications to that we're going to have to talk about and discuss further. Thanks.
Okay, so for 10.1, you're moving
Adoption or acceptance of the letter.
receipt, yeah. Okay, please.
I'll just call it, in this case, acceptance and acknowledgement. In this case, I'd love to acknowledge, you know, either written or otherwise to the Shishel Nation that we appreciate their letter of support. Thanks.
Procedurally, we can deal with that point first. So any other comments on 10.1? Okay, all in favor of receipt, acceptance and acknowledgement? Carried. Okay, 10.2. Obviously, I guess perhaps it's best that I speak first. You know, first, and I want to repeat, I have never been a residential school denier. I acknowledge and have always acknowledged the tremendous trauma and worse for some students and their families, and that this has had very serious impacts on their children and grandchildren. I've said this many, many times, including in our council meeting earlier this month. So for anyone to say anything otherwise about me is I categorically reject it. I've had excellent relationships with the Shishel members, including elders, former chiefs, and young and old members. As recent as 3 weeks ago, one of the elders offered that they thought I'd done more for reconciliation than all the mayors over the last 20 years. Now, I'm honored by that, but I don't take that as any measure of success. I was just pleased that she shared her feelings about that. I've listened carefully to survivors and their families share their truths, and I've shared some stories of the unbelievable suffering that some of my extended family have endured. To me, that's what matters. Sharing is at the core of how we find common ground, reconciliation, if you will, to go forward. So I was very disappointed to receive the letters from the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs and from the Chief and Council. Inexplicably, nobody made any effort to contact me for dialogue before sending their letters. And to me, that's not a helpful way to move forward towards reconciliation. In fact, I worry that it's driving people apart because we need more dialogue, not less. It's also puzzling to me that in all this time, no one has actually asked me about my views of the book Grave Error. Apparently, just having it in my possession is all people need, it seems, to defame me. These are sad times indeed when having a book substitutes for having a dialogue about what is in the book. So calling someone names and then refusing to talk about it gets us nowhere. Shutting me or anyone down for having read this book, along with a great many other books along the spectrum of Indigenous history, is the opposite of dialogue. In some cases, it's virtue signaling rather than making the effort to dig down and truly understand. You know, we've shared many, many challenges, and I think we need to focus on delivering real effective solutions. We've heard some of what was discussed at UBCM, things like the drug crisis that we all share, the housing crisis, the crime that we're doing our best to work on, water, highways, and more. And we've got to work on those together. I worry, you know, that we're in an area of emotional turmoil, but talking and being open to understanding each other, and yes, reading wisely is the only way forward. To that end, I will continue to reach out to Lehewus Jo in the hope she will agree to meet and work with me. In the meantime, I'm also hoping that Chief Gary Feschuk and Mayor Cam Reed will accept my invitation to continue their work together. As council knows, Cam and Gary led the Swiyaya reconciliation movement, which has recently completed their primary goal of building and raising the reconciliation pole outside the House of Clans. And I'm hopeful they will agree to continue their leadership in working with Chief and Council and all of us here. My vision is that they bring an important historical context and a shared vision about how we can work together in the future. I'm committed to working with them as I am with all of you and with Lehewus and the councillors to identify activities and processes to move us forward to true reconciliation. In the meantime, I'm certainly going to continue to serve as mayor of Sechelt. I was elected by the taxpayers of Sechelt, and I intend to fulfill my mandate. And I also intend to stand for election as mayor in the 2026 municipal election. So those are my comments. I look to the rest. Any other comments from council? Councilor
I'll
Rowe.
start. I already read most of that in the paper this afternoon, and it does sound like the start of a great election platform. I do want to stop the gaslighting though, because this is not about us telling anyone what they can and can't read. First of all, this letter comes as a result of your decision to not support the resolution. Although the book is referenced in relation to the topic of denialism, that's not why you've received this letter. And that's pretty black and white. And nobody here on September 4th suggested that that book should not be read by anybody. And that got gaslit all over Facebook and everywhere else.
What is, I don't think you should be using gaslight.
Well,
It's a
it's-
rather pejorative term.
It's a what?
Pejorative.
Oh. Well, okay.
We're trying to have a good dialogue. That's why I pick up on that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, basically what was shared was not what was said. And I don't want to see that going forward. This isn't about censorship. This is about the fact that yes, you had the book, you brought it into Municipal Hall, you talked with staff about it and thought we should all read it. That's the end. Nobody had any issues with you reading the book. I just want to be clear about that. And what the basis of this letter is around the not supporting the UBCIC resolution.
Okay, I did say at the time, and I guess I need to say it again. I chose to vote against it because I felt it is important that we have dialogue. And that was my preference. So we need to talk about things. When we start throwing letters and edicts back and forth, I think that's not the path to reconciliation. So that was my reason, and I stand by it. I want dialogue. I want to meet with the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs. I want to continue to meet with our Sechelt friends and neighbors. I want dialogue. Councillor Inkster?
Yeah, I don't.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I don't think for the next couple of years anyway, that's not going to happen. They've indicated that in their letter. I think you'd have to be a little bit tone deaf to not have read their letter and see what they've indicated that we need to do. And I think this is an opportunity, as you've encouraged us to speak to a number of the issues presented therein. I'm going to use the word gaslighting because it wasn't referenced. Councillor Rowe wasn't referencing yourself in that. She was referencing what was on social media. And the gaslighting defined is people that insinuate that others with real concerns are crazy or their concerns are unfounded. That's what she's referencing. And I think that's inappropriate for us to have within our community where we're attempting to work together and or foster long-term relationships with our friends and neighbors and families that we all have connections to in the Sechelt Nation. Those are my 2 points on that, and maybe other council members have further.
Councillor Bell?
I've thought about this a lot. This is a really difficult discussion for me, and quite frankly, I feel quite emotional about it. As I look at the letter, there's 2 points. The first one is about the resolution, and Councillor Rowe has spoke about it, and you have spoke about it. The second part relates to the baffling decision to bring material that espouses residential school denialism and misinformation into Municipal Hall, and that you have discussed that material with senior staffers. So this is where I want to land for a moment. I've not read the book. It's not my choice, and I am going to read from my notes because I've spent some time on this. I understand the premise of this book is to get the questions out around residential school information that is out there, and that is about researching what is fact or not as fact. I have no problem with people who want to research the facts, nor do I have any judgment around those who want to choose to read this book. What I have a problem with is the impact this book is having on the emotional well-being of our First Nations community at this very point in time. People who we know have suffered immeasurably in residential schools and who have had loved ones who never came home. Nation people who are still dealing with the consequences today and doing their best every day to try and forget the past and embrace the future. We know this pain is still fresh. We've been at recent events and we've heard the stories. We've been in the room together and we've heard our First Nations friends and community talk, and we've seen the tears and we've heard their sadness. So I don't know why you chose to bring attention to this book, Mary. To what end? To fight for what you call censorship? To prove that there may be some facts that aren't accurate or true about residential schools? Has this been worth the consequences that we are facing today? You've broken the trust of our First Nations community. And at this time, when we have been coming together as a community, walking together, and I feel your poor judgment will divide rather than unite. And the one principle I have always believed in as a leader is that great leaders unite and weak leaders divide. And I'll leave it at that.
I don't believe I've used the word censorship. And there's a lot of assumptions in what you've said. Frankly, I think I'll respond after giving it some, reviewing it on YouTube. I will repeat, I favor dialogue. I think the the book is one of many books that I've read. I'd be interested to hear from council at some point. What do you read books about this topic? Because I've read on all sides. I've read, so I'll leave it at that. Councillor McLaughlin.
I mean, I've had it on all this time. I decided to read a book that I have from 1954 by Farley Mowat. I got as a discard from the library called People of the Deer. And so it goes to 1954. This was his first book. And he really is a pioneer in environmentalism and ecology in Canada. And that book clearly spells out the issues at hand in some ways, because one thing he says at the end is, don't let the facts stand in the way of the truth. People can pull facts, which, you know, with the computer media we have now, can invent anything. Anybody can say anything. This organization that wrote this book is, you know, they published it themselves. They want to spread it around, and it's not even part of our longstanding Canadian history of having good authors speaking the truth about Canada that we respect and love. So it's not, why would I want to read this book? There's lots of classic good books that have the truth in it, that tell us all about residential denialism and the issues that First Nations have faced all across Canada. There's no denying it. So why would I want to read this book? It's insulting to me, even to say, why don't you read this book? Why haven't you read this book? Honest to God, there's a lot of good things to read here from people that I respect. Now, speaking of respect, I feel we've lost the respect of the public. We've lost the respect, I believe, of council and staff through the things that have gone on in addition to this particular incident. We've lost the respect of First Nations and of the SCRD due to your actions. None of us have had anything to do with the situations that have come up with you on these matters. So I think we need to have a serious, closed conversation with the councillors to discuss what to do, because this cannot continue. Cannot, not for 2 years, not for another 4 years after that. It's just not fair to us. It's not fair to the public. It certainly isn't fair to the First Nations to be subjected to this kind of issue on your behalf. You brought it. You have to be responsible for it. If you didn't agree with it, why didn't you say so? You had opportunities in council to say so. You did not ever say that you didn't agree with it. And when you did not support the resolution, that apparently speaks volumes to a lot of people, especially to our First Nations neighbors, friends, and in a sense, family. Because if we can't all function here in this beautiful part of Canada together with First Nations, who are an innovative band across Canada, leaders, then really I am just at a loss for the value that we can bring to this council with you at the head. So I would want to ask you to resign, and I probably will. And I don't know how the other councillors will feel, and I know you don't want to, but you don't want to accept blame at all for anything in the CUF report either. You don't want to acknowledge any of these things, which to me is just like not helping us do the good things that I know this council can do. They have a lot of talent and skills and passion and heart. And yet here we are constantly dealing with one thing after another, which is based on what you dictate should be happening for the most part, and with unfair practices. I don't think it's been governance. It hasn't been transparency. To me, it's just been unbelievable. And I think it's got to stop. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it short. I've been struggling with this, trying to prepare remarks without getting overly emotional by it. You know, at the heart of this, I mean, neither the Shishelt Nation nor the District of Shishelt is going anywhere. We do have to work together for our entire community, our entire region. I'm quite heartened by the Shishelt Nation Council extending that olive branch to 6 elected members of this community to work together on issues that do matter to this community. They want to work on housing, they want to work on safety, they want to work on economic development, regional growth, and yes, even water with the District of Shishelt Council. It's so much more than just the words that are in this letter. I truly hope Lehewus does reach out to you to explain a little bit more about it, because, you know, I've heard things over the last year and a half. And I think this letter is really a culmination of everything else. It's not just this. So, you know, I've said it before, I have no intention of reading that book. That's fine. You know, if anybody wants to read it, they can read it. But for the mayor to double down on it on September 4th, when given an opportunity to acknowledge that maybe it wasn't appropriate to bring into Municipal Hall, is astounding. Our staff shouldn't have to deal with that. It should not be part of the municipal government landscape in the least. And I think I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to leave it with conversations that I've had in living rooms with members of elders and Shishelt friends that have shared their views, shared their experiences, shared their truths, and I've accepted those. I've accepted and I believe them. And I'm so sad that it has come to this, because I have tried to maintain the relationships, and clearly from the letter, I haven't succeeded with Lehewus. I hope that we can find ways to work together. That's why I've suggested including and asking Mayor Cam Reed and Chief Gary Feschuk to help, because I think that we need to bring history into this. They've proven the ability to work together, and that is something I think we're all in agreement with, that we do need to work together, and that's certainly always been my commitment. I probably spent more time on my relationships with our Shishelt friends and neighbors than anything else in this council term. So that is a hopeful statement that I hope that we can find common ground, and I'd like to leave the discussion there.
Question for you, because you, based on your statement just now. Did you want to leave it there? Can I ask a question? So you've indicated a number of times in your presentation and conversations now with council that you had a number of conversations with elders and the Shishelt people over the last while. Have you had, and how many discussions on this issue have you had with those same people over the last 7 days?
None, because I have been, of course, at UBCM, and out of respect, as I think council knows, Elder Willard Joe passed away earlier this week, and I'm aware of another tragedy today. So I've had no effort, I've made no effort out of respect this week. Of course, I was in Vancouver last week. So that's the answer to the question. My intention is to reach out, but I'll do it in a respectful way, honoring that Willard's funeral has been announced. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I'd like to put forward a motion that council appoint the acting mayor as the District of Sechelt Council's Indigenous Relations Liaison. The Indigenous Liaison will help build constructive relationships between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities and aim to improve the relationship between the Sechelt Nation and District of Sechelt councils. And further, that the mayor disengage and not correspond with Sechelt Nation as a representative of the District of Sechelt. This includes, but is not limited to, attending Sechelt Nation events or gatherings, meeting with Sechelt Nation Council on district business.
Okay, well, I've said my piece. If you want, I will abide by the directions of council, but I will not be restrained in terms of continuing to reach out to friends and maintaining relations. This is a poor choice in my view, and of course I'm opposed to it. We will have discussions in closed meeting about some aspects of this. Yes.
I hear what you're saying in reference to the motion put forward, but this motion is merely in answer to and reflective of the letter written by the Sechelt Chief and Council. I think that our council is, as we were recognized in their first letter to us, recognizing their wishes.
This motion is a blindside. No. That's council, but it's council's right to bring motions forward, but so be it. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? I'm opposed, of course. Motion carries. Yes.
I'd also like to make an additional motion that this letter be received.
All in favor? Okay, any other motions? Great. All right. Council, yes, we are ready to adjourn. Seconded, all in favor? We're adjourned.